I think my mother did exactly the right thing. I think it's absolutely extraordinary.
Princess Anne did not hesitate, soften her words, or protect the illusion of royal unity. Standing before a stunned gathering inside Buckingham Palace, she delivered a sentence that struck directly at the king's most personal decision. "I told Charles the truth about Camilla years ago." The room fell silent. Charles did not answer. Camilla's expression hardened, and in that unbearable pause, decades of loyalty, warning, resentment, and buried family pain suddenly returned to the surface. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Anne placed her untouched glass on a side table and turned directly toward Charles. The closed reception had brought together senior royals and household officials, the trusted staff responsible for managing royal duties and private arrangements. Camilla had challenged the Princess Royal's loyalty to the king, accusing her of resisting decisions simply because she disliked change. Anne answered with the sentence no one inside Buckingham Palace expected to hear. The declaration carried unusual force because Anne had spent decades protecting the monarchy through discipline, service, and silence. The Princess Royal, a title traditionally given to the monarch's eldest daughter, rarely exposed private disagreements involving her brother. Her decision to speak openly suggested that whatever Charles had ignored years earlier was serious enough to outweigh family unity. Charles gripped the back of a chair and stared at his sister. The king's anger was unmistakable, but something darker moved beneath it: fear. He knew Anne was not inventing the past, and William recognized the change in his father's face immediately. The prince understood that the monarch remembered the exact conversation, even though he had never shared it with his heir. Camilla demanded clarification. The queen consort asked whether Anne was exaggerating an old disagreement to humiliate them. Anne repeated the statement slowly, refusing to soften a single word. She said the truth had been ignored once, and would not be buried again. Then the warning finally took shape. Anne explained that her concern had never been Charles's romance, Camilla's reputation, or whether the public would accept their marriage. It concerned the growing influence of personal devotion over royal judgment. Constitutional judgment means the careful decisions a monarch must make for the institution rather than for private affection. Anne had feared that Charles would stop separating the woman he loved from the advice he was required to question. Charles did not deny it. His silence exposed more than anger ever could. Before leaving, Anne delivered one final blow. She told her brother that she still possessed the handwritten note he had given her after their original confrontation, a note proving he once admitted her warning was right. But Anne's declaration was only the surface of the crisis, because behind those 9 devastating words stood 3 people whose loyalties had been colliding for years. To the public, they were senior royals standing beneath the same crown. Behind closed doors, they were something far more complicated. A brother desperate to defend the woman he loved, a sister determined to protect the institution they inherited, and a queen consort who never forgot who had doubted her. Anne's statement did not create this conflict. It exposed it. And suddenly, every sacrifice, private insult, and unspoken grievance between them demanded to be remembered. Charles and Anne had grown beneath the same pressure, yet duty shaped them in opposite ways. He searched for emotional reassurance when royal life became cold or uncertain. She answered that same pressure with discipline, blunt judgment, and restraint. The Princess Royal, the title traditionally given to the monarch's eldest daughter, believed loyalty meant telling the truth before danger became crisis. Her brother often experienced that honesty as rejection. Camilla gradually became the center of Charles's private confidence. The queen consort influenced his personal schedule, household appointments, and response to difficult family disputes. A royal household is the staff and office responsible for managing a senior royal's public duties and private arrangements. Anne did not object to affection. She objected whenever devotion appeared to silent scrutiny. Camilla remembered every sign of that resistance. Formal smiles that ended too quickly. Conversations Anne shortened without apology. Decisions the princess questioned when others remained quiet. She viewed those moments as personal rejection, while her sister-in-law saw them as necessary limits around influence that had become increasingly difficult to challenge. William then uncovered another hidden layer. Shortly before Charles became king, Anne had requested a private meeting with her nephew and cancelled it after receiving a direct message from the future monarch. The prince realized his aunt may have attempted to warn him before the succession changed everything. Sophie deepened the mystery. The trusted confidant quietly told William that Anne had carried a sealed envelope between royal residences for years and refused every request to explain it. Whatever lay inside had survived moves, funerals, celebrations, and the beginning of a new reign. Charles entered Camilla's sitting room after the reception and closed the door himself. She removed a bracelet, placed it beside her chair, and asked whether Anne's accusation was true. The king stood silently, his guilt answered before his voice could. Camilla admitted that the words frightened her because the Princess Royal never speaks without evidence. Her anger had not disappeared, but fear now controlled it. Charles finally warned her that the original confrontation had involved one particular royal ceremony years earlier. Anne remembered everything that happened that night, and so did he. And the deeper Charles searched his memory, the closer he came to the single night when Anne's private concern became an irreversible family warning. Years before Anne's statement shook Buckingham Palace, one private ceremony changed the relationship between the king, his sister, and Camilla forever. It was not a rumor, an argument over jewelry, or a passing disagreement about protocol. It was a moment of authority exercised where none had officially been granted. Anne witnessed it, Charles defended it, and before the night ended, the Princess Royal gave her brother a warning so severe that neither of them would ever fully escape it. The rupture began during a private royal honors dinner at Windsor Castle. A royal honors dinner is a formal gathering recognizing service to the monarchy, often attended by senior family members, trusted staff, and distinguished guests. One veteran palace aide had served the royal household for more than 30 years and expected to retire with formal recognition. Instead, after questioning a last-minute seating change affecting Anne, he was suddenly removed from the guest list. Anne found him standing alone near a service doorway, still holding the unused place card bearing his name. The dinner continued without him. His humiliation was quiet, but its meaning was brutal. Decades of loyalty had been erased because he questioned a decision made at the last moment. The princess demanded an explanation and learned Camilla had instructed a senior equerry to remove him. An equerry is a trusted royal officer who assists senior family members with personal and official duties. The order had been given without consulting Charles, the Lord Chamberlain, or Anne herself. The Lord Chamberlain is the senior official responsible for overseeing major royal events and household arrangements. Anne confronted Camilla in a side corridor. She accused her of using personal access to exercise authority she had never formally received. The Queen Consort refused to apologize, insisting the seating dispute had threatened order and required decisive action. Charles arrived before the argument ended. The future king immediately defended Camilla and told his sister that loyalty required accepting the future he had chosen. Anne heard the deeper message. His devotion had become more important than questioning whether the decision was right. Later that night, she faced him alone in the private library. The princess warned that Camilla's greatest danger was not ambition by itself. It was Charles's willingness to excuse behavior he would condemn in anyone else. He rejected the accusation publicly, but shame followed him after midnight. Charles wrote Anne a brief handwritten note, admitting the seating decision had been wrong. He asked her to remain silent, because exposing it would damage his relationship and weaken the family. She kept the note. That forgotten place card became the first crack in the royal bond, and now Anne was ready to confront Charles with the proof that he had recognized the danger from the beginning. When Charles summoned Anne the following morning, he expected restraint, discretion, and perhaps even regret. What entered the room instead was the same unbending resolve that had protected the monarchy through scandal after scandal. No advisors sat between them. No officials softened the language. A brother faced the sister who had warned him, and for the first time, the king could not hide behind rank, marriage, or the silence of the palace. Charles closed the study door and demanded to know why Anne had exposed their old disagreement before witnesses. The palace study was the private working room where the monarch handled sensitive papers and family decisions away from public ceremony. The king said her words had humiliated him during the most vulnerable stage of his reign, and had wounded Camilla in front of officials who would never forget the scene. Anne did not retreat. The princess explained that Camilla had challenged her loyalty publicly, leaving only two choices: remain silent or allow a false version of history to stand. She told her brother that protecting the crown did not mean protecting the monarch from consequences he had knowingly created. Her anger was fierce, but grief lived beneath it. She still loved Charles. That was precisely why the confrontation hurt. Charles accused his sister of damaging more than his marriage. The king insisted she had weakened the authority of the crown by suggesting his judgment had been compromised for years. Anne answered that authority built on denial was already weak. Her words landed with brutal force because both of them knew the argument was no longer about one dinner or one insult. Anne removed a plain envelope and placed it on the desk. Inside rested the handwritten note Charles had written after the Windsor Honors dinner. She slid it toward him but kept two fingers pressed against its edge until he looked directly at her. Only then did the princess release it. Charles read his own admission. The note confirmed that Camilla had acted improperly, that Anne's warning had been justified, and that he had asked for silence to protect the relationship. The king sat down heavily. Years of defense collapsed in a few lines written by his own hand. Charles asked why she had kept it. Anne answered, "Because one day you would tell yourself it never happened." The sentence broke something deeper than pride. Charles saw not an enemy across the desk, but the sister who had preserved the truth when he could not bear it. Anne saw the brother who had chosen love over accountability and had spent years paying the price. Charles did not tear the note. He reached for the telephone and called William, asking him to come immediately. The moment William entered the study, the argument stopped being about an old family wound and became a battle over who would control the monarchy's next chapter. William entered expecting another family dispute. Instead, he found his father seated beside a handwritten confession, his aunt standing in silence, and the future of the royal household hanging between them. Charles wanted loyalty. Anne wanted accountability. Camilla wanted the note removed from the conversation entirely, but the Prince of Wales understood something the others had avoided. Whichever side he chose would define not only his relationship with his father, but the kind of king he intended to become. Charles showed William the note and explained the full story of the Windsor dinner. The prince learned how a veteran aide had been removed after questioning a seating change, how Camilla had acted without proper authority, and how the king later admitted Anne's warning had been justified. As heir, William could not overrule the sovereign, the reigning monarch who holds final authority. Yet his control over his own household and future planning gave his judgment enormous weight. Charles asked his son to treat the matter as a family failure rather than a constitutional concern. The king argued that public unity had to come before private judgment, because another visible fracture could weaken confidence in the crown. William listened, then asked whether unity could survive when everyone inside the family was expected to deny what they had witnessed. Anne broke the silence. The Princess Royal revealed that the Windsor incident had not been isolated. Similar pressure had appeared around appointments, patronage access, and household invitations. A patronage is a formal royal connection to a charity or organization, and control over those roles can shape influence, visibility, and public authority. William then admitted that he had independently blocked two recent requests from Camilla's office because they crossed into decisions affecting Catherine, their staff, and their public program. The prince had reached the same conclusion as Anne without knowing the full history. Charles removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. The king realized that his sister and son had identified the same pattern from different directions. This was no coordinated attack. It was a warning repeated across generations. William read the note twice, folded it carefully, and returned it to Anne rather than handing it back to his father. The gesture carried sorrow, but also resolve. He would not destroy the evidence merely to make Charles feel protected. The prince proposed an immediate restriction. Camilla's private office could no longer issue instructions affecting another royal household without written approval from the people responsible for it. Charles said nothing. Anne held the note. William understood that the boundary would wound his father, but avoiding it would shape the monarchy through fear. The proposed restriction sounded administrative, but when Camilla learned what William intended to do, the consequences became painfully personal. The first consequence arrived without ceremony. There was no public decree, no dramatic announcement from the palace gates, and no royal signature displayed for the cameras. A single revised instruction was delivered to Camilla's office. No request involving another royal household could move forward without written approval. To everyone else, it looked procedural. To Camilla, it was unmistakable. Anne's warning had survived. William had accepted it, and Charles, despite all his promises, had allowed the boundary to be imposed. Charles had refused to oppose the proposal in front of both his heir and his sister. That silence allowed William's restriction to become an internal operating rule, meaning a formal instruction governing how palace offices must work with one another. Camilla kept her title and ceremonial position, but her office could no longer influence appointments, invitations, or household decisions beyond its own authority without written consent. Camilla read the instruction alone. The queen consort did not feel stripped of status. She felt stripped of trust. The order confirmed that senior members of the family no longer believed her judgment could remain separate from personal loyalty. For years, she had viewed informal influence as part of her partnership with Charles. Now that same influence had been defined as a danger requiring control. Charles entered and immediately understood what the document had done. Camilla accused him of surrendering their marriage to Anne's version of the past and William's vision of the future. The king tried to explain that the boundary protected every household, but she heard only betrayal. He had promised that their partnership would survive scrutiny. Instead, he had allowed scrutiny to become policy. Charles finally admitted that Anne's note was genuine. The monarch confessed that he had hidden the Windsor incident because he feared losing Camilla if he challenged her too forcefully. His silence had not come from certainty, it had come from fear. Camilla remembered the excluded aide. She insisted that he had deliberately undermined her place beside Charles, and that her decision had been defensive, not cruel. Yet the explanation could not erase the humiliation or the years of denial that followed. Camilla removed the instruction from its folder, folded it once, and placed it inside a drawer. She told Charles she would obey it, but would never forget who had forced it upon her. The king then asked Anne to meet him alone that evening. No William, no Camilla, no advisors or documents. Camilla remained motionless after Charles left, listening as the door closed, and realizing he had chosen to face his sister without her. Yet Charles's decision to meet Anne alone created the one opening neither rank nor protocol could control: a final conversation between two siblings carrying decades of unfinished pain. That evening, the king removed every shield around him. No private secretary waited outside the inner door. No briefing paper lay open on the table. No crown, uniform, or formal address separated Charles from the sister who had known him before duty hardened them both. Anne arrived prepared for another argument. Instead, she found her brother holding the old note in both hands, no longer defending what he had done, but finally admitting why he had done it. Charles had chosen a small private room associated with their late mother, a space filled with family memory rather than royal authority. The monarch wanted no witness and no official record. He told Anne that the conflict had never truly been about whether he loved Camilla. It was about whether that love had stopped him from setting limits when limits were necessary. The king admitted that he feared confronting his wife would confirm her deepest belief, that the royal family would never fully accept her. Every time Anne raised a concern, he heard not caution but rejection. Every boundary felt like another threat to the life he had fought to build. So he defended Camilla even when doubt had already entered his own mind. Anne listened without interruption. The Princess Royal then confessed that her harshness had also come from fear. She had watched her brother surrender his judgment whenever personal loyalty was tested, and she believed silence would allow affection to become unchecked power. Her anger had never been aimed at love itself. It had been aimed at what Charles permitted in love's name. Charles revealed that after the Windsor dinner, he had considered imposing formal boundaries. He abandoned the plan when Camilla threatened to withdraw from public royal life, meaning she would step away from official duties performed on behalf of the crown. He chose emotional peace over accountability, and asked Anne to carry the cost. Anne finally explained why she kept the note. She had never intended to destroy Camilla with it. She preserved it so Charles could not erase his own moment of clarity, or convince himself that the warning had been invented later. The king apologized, not for loving his wife, but for forcing his sister to hold the truth alone, while allowing her to appear disloyal. Then Charles placed the note into Anne's hand, closed her fingers around it, and said, "You should never have had to keep this for me." Anne's anger gave way to quiet grief. Years had been lost because they defended opposite versions of the same truth. She agreed to issue a second statement, but only if Charles publicly supported the new boundaries and refused to punish anyone for acknowledging the past. Their private reconciliation could repair the family, but outside the palace, Anne's first statement had already become a national reckoning. By sunrise, Anne's words were no longer confined to palace walls. They appeared across television screens, radio bulletins, newspaper stands, and crowded pavements outside royal residences. Yet one image came to define the entire crisis: Charles leaving a private chapel alone, his head lowered, while Anne waited several steps behind him without approaching. It did not look like victory. It looked like two siblings carrying the cost of a truth that had arrived decades too late. Palace communications confirmed that Anne had made the statement and announced new written boundaries between separate royal households. A royal household is the staff and office responsible for managing each senior family member's duties, schedules, and private arrangements. The response avoided condemning Camilla directly. Instead, it described the restriction as a measure designed to protect clarity, responsibility, and future stability. The Daily Chronicle captured the public mood with a stark front page. Beneath a photograph of Charles staring down at the steps outside St. George's Chapel, appeared the headline, "Anne warned him." The image carried more force than any palace statement because the king looked neither angry nor defiant. He looked burdened by a warning he had once chosen to ignore. A national broadcaster framed the crisis as the moment private loyalty collided with public duty. The program repeated Anne's declaration before explaining the revised palace instruction, which prevented one household from directing another without written approval. The phrase spread quickly because it reduced years of tension to one painful truth. Love had influenced power, and duty had finally demanded a limit. Outside Buckingham Palace, a crowd gathered near the gates. One woman held a handwritten sign reading, "Truth is loyalty too." The message captured the sympathy forming around Anne. She had not challenged the monarchy by speaking. Many believed she had defended it by refusing to continue a lie. Camilla watched the coverage alone. The queen consort remained controlled, until commentators described the restrictions as confirmation that Anne's concerns had been justified. Then the certainty left her expression. Public isolation had arrived, not through the loss of title, but through the collapse of trust. Charles responded with a short personal message. The king accepted responsibility for failing to address the original dispute when it happened, and confirmed that the new boundaries had his support. His admission did not erase the past, but it ended the defense that had protected it. Anne left the palace without speaking. She paused beside her car and looked back toward the building before departing. Being proven right had brought no triumph, only the weight of what truth had cost them all. The world had already chosen its symbols, but only Anne's final statement could determine whether this became a royal destruction or a painful act of repair. When Princess Anne spoke again, she did not arrive to deepen the wound. She arrived to close it. Her first statement had exposed a truth Charles could no longer deny, but her final words revealed why she had carried that truth for so long. This was not an attempt to remove Camilla, embarrass the king, or divide the monarchy. It was a demand that love, rank, and personal loyalty never become excuses for avoiding responsibility. And this time, Charles stood beside her. Anne released a direct written statement confirming that she had warned her brother years earlier about allowing personal devotion to influence royal judgment. The Princess Royal, the title traditionally held by the monarch's eldest daughter, made her purpose unmistakable. She had sought accountability, not punishment. Charles answered through a personal palace message, admitting that he had failed to correct the Windsor incident and confirming that the new boundaries between royal households would remain permanent. The king then faced the human cost hidden beneath the policy. Charles met privately with the retired aide, who had been excluded from the honors dinner, and apologized for allowing the humiliation to remain uncorrected. The former staff member did not demand public recognition. He asked only that no loyal servant be treated that way again. The monarch promised the lesson would not be forgotten. Camilla accepted the restrictions without another confrontation. The queen consort sent Anne a handwritten message acknowledging that the seating decision had crossed a line, although she still believed her motives had been misunderstood. Her sister-in-law offered no warmth and claimed no victory. She replied with one sentence: "Responsibility mattered more than agreement." William understood the meaning during a later family service. The prince watched Charles and Anne enter together, not because the conflict had been erased, but because they had finally confronted it without disguising pain as unity. Before the service began, the king pulled out his sister's chair. She paused, rested one hand briefly on his shoulder, and sat beside him without speaking. That gesture delivered the final verdict. Anne's statement strengthened the monarchy because it proved that loyalty without truth becomes obedience, while truth without love becomes cruelty. Charles remained king, Camilla remained beside him, Anne remained the crown's uncompromising guardian. William inherited a clearer principle for his future reign. No royal relationship could stand above responsibility. The palace did not emerge untouched, but it emerged honest, and Princess Anne's warning, ignored for years, finally became the truth that restored the boundary between devotion to family and duty to the crown. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.